Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund Committee. Welcome to the members of the committee, our voting members, our non-voting members, our members of staff who are on this side, and our visitors, Joanne and Michael from LGPS Central. Welcome. And we have some other members, officers that are with us virtually. So morning to you all as well. Thank you. My name is Eric Kerry. I'm chairman of the committee, and well, we will remind members that it has been indicated that the live broadcast has commenced, and so they'll need to make sure that their microphones are being used when speaking, please, and switch them off if you can as soon as you finish speaking. That helps the feedback. So moving on to the first item, it's the minutes of the last meeting held on the 24th of June. Can I ask those minutes be agreed, those that were at the meeting, please? Was that all agreed? Thank you very much. I'll sign those later. Item number 2, apologies for absence. May I ask our Democratic Service Officer, Jo, to tell us about the apologies, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Today we have Councillor Regid substituting for Councillor Mike Introna. We've also received apologies for absence from Councillors Sam Webster and Graham Chapman from Nottingham City Council, and also Mrs Sue Reader. Thank
you very much, Jo. Item number 3 is declarations of interest by members and officers. So may I ask if any members or officers present have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare, please? I take that as no. And B, do any members or officers present have any private interests, either pecuniary or non-pecuniary, to declare, please? Okay, that's a no. Thank you. So moving to item number 4 is to note a change in the membership of the committee with the replacement of Councillor Jonathan Wheeler with Councillor Gordon Wheeler. So, Gordon, welcome as a permanent member. Good to see you here. Thank you very much for joining our committee. Thank you. So that's a noting item. Should we take that as noted, everybody? Is that okay? Thank you. Moving on to the first substantive item is item number 5 is local government pension scheme additional temporary resources for the MacLeod project. The committee over the last year or two has been having a watchful eye on MacLeod and its progression, and a lot of hard work being done to evaluate the situation. And I think we really do need to get this right. We need to get it right quickly. So before I hand over to Sarah to present the report, may I move the recommendation set out on page 14 of the agenda, which are 1, to agree the funding for the additional temporary project resources, which are detailed in the report, and 2, to agree to receive further update reports as the project progresses. Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry. That's not how. Yes, sir. I need to adjourn the meeting. Members, I'm going to adjourn the meeting until the public gallery remains calm. Thank you. We can. She's there. Okay, thank you, members, colleagues, for bearing with us during that short interlude where members of the public gallery intervened in this meeting rather disrespectfully. They understand, I'm sure we've said many times, that the public should not engage in a meeting. We've got a lot of hard work to do, and we'll now start on that work again. We were on item number 5. I did read the recommendations on page 14 on our pack, so I won't do that again. I will hand over to Sarah Stevenson, please. Sorry. Oh, may I ask for a seconder? Sorry, I met a seconder.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much.
Chair, and I'll reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor. Sarah, please introduce the report.
Thank you, Councillor Kerry. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval for funding from Pensions Committee for additional temporary resources that are required to ensure that Nottinghamshire Pension Fund is able to fulfil its statutory obligations under the MacLeod judgment. As committee will no doubt remember, a previous report was presented in September 2020, which detailed the background to the MacLeod case, which is a case brought by firefighters and judges through the courts, which identified unjustified age discrimination in transitional protection arrangements in pension schemes between old and new schemes. Paragraph 5 details the 2 groups of LGPS members affected by the court ruling. As detailed in the report, the statutory obligation to implement the MacLeod judgment has implications on members' benefits, employers within the fund, and the administration of the fund. Today's report details the major impact on the administration team, which will require a review and updating of business processes in line with MacLeod underpin protections, collection of data from scheme employers backdated to April 2014, retrospective calculations on all eligible pensioners, which may result in backdated pension adjustments and payments, and application of the MacLeod underpin protections being determined and applied to eligible members. We initially estimated that 24,000 members' records would be affected. Further work indicates that this figure is higher at 29,000. Communication to all stakeholders will be essential. Scheme Advisory Board have an implementation group to help provide documentation to support funds. We've considered the resourcing requirements. Committee will no doubt remember that there are a number of major projects underway and planned within the Pensions Office. For example, GMP reconciliation, our own in-house transformation of pension administration and ways of working, the National Pensions Dashboard, and the Pension Scheme Act 2021. Resourcing requirements from MacLeod have been considered against these activities. Following appointment of a MacLeod project manager, consideration for the additional resources and other options for fulfilling our statutory obligations have been considered. Detailed at paragraph 14 are the additional resources required initially for a 2-year period, but this will be kept under review. Once resources are approved, clearly these individuals will need to go through a training induction programme and then to actually work on the MacLeod project itself. So if funding is approved this morning, a further report will be presented to Personnel Committee in September to seek approval to establish the temporary posts. Recruitment will be in line with the County Council's recruitment and selection procedures, and experienced staff within the Pensions Office will be eligible to apply, but appropriate backfill arrangements will need to be put in place as well. We have considered other options, for example, absorbing the work into the existing workload. However, this is not a viable option and would impact on the delivery of business as usual. We have considered engaging external resources, but our preferred option is to engage our own in-house temporary team in line with the approach taken by other LGPS funds. So the recommendations of this report are, number 1, recommending Pensions Committee agree to the funding for additional resources as detailed within the report, and secondly, to agree to receive further update reports in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for that introduction. This is really, really important. I mean, new members to the committee won't be known all the detail we've been going through over the last period of time to understand the impact of the McLeod judgment. And thank you very much for the hard work you've done. This has been a long time coming, but we now, I think, have a good idea of what we need. It may change in the future. There might be other changes, but we're trying to make the best job of the increased workload that we have to do. So, and it also fits in, I think, enabling to get people into the fund admin, that we might be opportunities of getting new people in and also training them up and getting them part of our succession planning, which is a very important thing of the continuity of the pension fund. So that's really good news. Thank you very much for the detail. Can I ask any members if they wish to comment, please? I had Councillor Wheeler was first to indicate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Sarah. As Chairman's already indicated, a lot of hard work, but very necessary work that lies ahead. I've already, as Chairman of the Personnel Committee, I'm aware of this, Sarah, so I'm sure you're aware. There have already been discussions with March, and the leader of the council is also aware of what's coming his way, my way, the Personnel Committee's way. So, subject to what happens this morning, we look forward to receiving the report and discussing it at Personnel Committee meeting in September. Thank you again for all your hard work, Sarah.
Okay, I mean, does that fit in with the plan, Sarah, that the timing is right? Because we've obviously got to do some work prior to that.
Yeah, we've already got a slot on Personnel Committee in September,
Yes.
ready to go for that. And again, Councillor Wheeler, as he's correctly said, has already had sight of previous reports and the establishment of the project manager post as well. So I think there's good knowledge
Fantastic.
already.
Thank you very much. Anne, you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chair. So we're talking about 2 years here, so we're talking about 630,000 and then to be reviewed. What proportion is that of estimated project costs? I mean, how much is the whole thing going to cost? How far have we got with the project? I mean, we appointed a project manager last year. And when will this committee receive any updates on that project?
Yeah, okay. John?
I just in terms of update on the project manager was recruited and appointed in April. At this point in time, we've been waiting for nationally to have a advice and support on what the recommends are going to be to making changes to people's pensions in relation to McLeod. At the moment, we're planning and we've been putting together data to send out to scheme employers, and we're hoping that that's going to go out sometime in September, October, for employers to respond to our requests for checking of data. Once we have that data, which will take quite a time to pull together, so I don't think we'll have particular ideas on the calculations and the remedy for McLeod until early in 2022, because of the time frame of that data coming back, plus also the need to recruit people to help with that process.
Sarah, did you want to add to that? Is that okay, Anne?
Can I just ask as well, is there any possibility, is it quite specific, this data? It can't be used for other purposes or pulled from other sources?
In terms of the data itself, the pension fund's in quite a good position, because unlike other funds, we continue to collect data after 2014 changes in the regulations. So whilst we have to check the data, and there's 29,000 records to check, we have to make sure that that data is correct, and it's able to be used to check individual calculations. So there are many facets to the project. It's not something we've asked for, and we're having to take it step by step.
Sarah, did you want to expand on that? Yeah.
I think there's a couple of things just to add to that. Obviously, recruitment of staff takes a period of time. Unfortunately, they're not sitting on the shelf waiting for us. We'll need to recruit. We're not sure at this time whether or not we would recruit the required number in one phase. I think if I have a look at the other service areas that I have responsibility for, whilst we have a lot of adverts out, advertising jobs, actually what we're seeing is the number of applications has fallen, and I think some of that is a result of the pandemic, where people who believe that they sit in a role that's fairly secure are tending to sit still rather than look to move. I think the other thing is obviously an extensive training programme the individuals will need to go through, so they've got the background to the LGPS, and we're utilising them to do some of our business as usual work in preparation for them then to move on to the McLeod activity. And that's obviously the link that Councillor Kerry has made to the potential for future succession planning as well. The collection of data that John has talked about also dovetails in with our transformation programme. And if you remember there, Councillor Peach, we have a work stream running which is about data audit and improvement. So where we can, we are threading activities together in with existing programmes of work as well. Thank you.
Okay. And John, sorry, quickly, please.
Just add to that as well. Also, we've got an eye on the valuation year next year as well. So that also takes time, and takes time from scheme employers to provide appropriate data. So there's a lot of hard work, and we won't see the benefit of it really until, like I say, early in 2022.
And just to summarise, really, I think that the key point from this is that as a fund, we've looked hard at what resources we need. We're not throwing money around. This is really a minimum amount. We may think a minimum amount, but the key thing is that we're not the only fund that's going to have to look for more resources. So there's a competitive market for people out there. So we need to get there early, and we need to start recruiting early so that we do get the right people at the right time. So I think it's very important that we approve this today. Sorry. Yes, Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. Just wondering, is there any scope for internal recruitment to work overtime on this project if they've been appropriately trained, or do we deem it's much more better to get temporary external staff?
Yep.
Can I come back on that?
Yes, good question. Yes, thank you.
Good question. In terms of the day-to-day activity, the focus is on making sure that we're able to pay our pensioners, process retirements, process deaths, etc. We do offer overtime to the pension team from time to time, and we look to try and mitigate as much work as possible from the pensions team. But as such, at the moment, there is that much work to do that it really isn't practical, and we definitely need additional resources to undertake these activities. It's quite difficult to explain, but and I have brought reports to committee about admin performance, and we just don't have enough resource to be able to do all the things that we need to do, hence the request for additional resources.
Is that okay, Lee? Okay, thank you. Mike?
Thanks, Chairman. I think the McLeod judgments caught me out a little bit, because I thought it was an overview of everything, which would have been a simple process to put in place, but obviously it's not. If we're looking at needing to do 50 a day with 10 people, and assuming that in itself then has a bearing on normal processes, the likelihood is that the 2 years that are projected at 50 day are exact. It's likely to be longer than that. So just coming back to I think you raised the issue about the fact that LGB Central potentially could be employing 50 people here. Is this something as a group that we could do that would alleviate each pension scheme to continue with its natural processes and have a specific working party concentrating on this?
Just before you come back on that, sir, I think the key issue isn't just the work that this has created, it's the way that this all fits together in our long-term strategy for the fund officers, so for the team. So do you want to just start?
Yeah. Councillor Pringle, John and I'll do a double act in responding to this. Obviously, we talk on an ongoing basis to other LGPS funds. Different funds are at different stages of their projects, etc. For once, we're probably slightly ahead of others, and I think that's born out of our experience of things such as GMP reconciliation, etc. You will know, and you have commented yourself on resourcing levels when John has presented the performance report. And I think, you know, John and I together have considered very carefully our approach, and also we've considered that in the sort of like in the range of our existing workforce and the age range of those as well. So I think this does very much feed into our succession planning going forward. I think for us, I think it's important that we retain the ownership of it. They are our members that are affected. They will come to us and ask us questions. If we had outsourced that to other organisations, then I think we would find that we would still be having to deal with those questions. So this probably is the much, the simpler approach in how to handle this key project. The calculations that I've done looking across the 29,000 is looked that half of those recalcs could be done through the system, and another half of them, so 14,500, requiring an officer to actually look at. And again, what we're still waiting for is a decision about what does it mean for people who are currently receipt of a pension, where they made a decision to take a lump sum. Did they take the standard? Did they take a fixed amount? Did they go to maximum conversion? Will they have a right to revisit those types of decisions? So I think, our, presentation this morning is about putting our fund in the right position to deliver what ultimately is a court judgment as well.
Chairman, just in recognising that, I don't think we've got enough. I think Gordon needs to be ready on Personnel Committee. The fact that this may be something that really overstretches the department and even these people, especially because it's an unknown quantity as to what people are going to ask you, and the work that's detailed in there. So, good luck.
Well, I think, Mike, we'll keep a very, very close look at that during the whole process. We need to manage this in the best way. And as we've seen from the last meeting where we had the annual performance report, we are one of the best performing in terms of cost per member authorities, which is brilliant. But we still have that ambition to be an efficient, effective fund, well-managed fund. So, but taking on board your points, yes, we'll keep looking at it. And the other comment was about we do need to regularly come back and have reports to the committee on progress. So again, that comment from earlier. Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously a very important job, and I wish you the best of luck with it, and good luck with your process. Are you at the situation yet at all? I assume all the costs involved in this are a charge against the pension fund. Yeah. Are you in any position yet to give us a ballpark figure of the implications of the McLeod report and financially against the pension fund? And really, I think as a committee, and quite rightly, colleagues here have said, we need updates. We also need regular updates on how much this is going to cost the fund. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Jonathan?
To answer very simply is no, at the moment we don't. Yeah. The pension managers are talking about this and how we're going to deal with it. And just coming back to Councillor Pringle's point about the pool, the pension managers of the pool, pension admin managers of the pool, do meet and discuss these things. So we do work together and come up with ideas together and discuss the way things are dealt with. But it is very much an individual pension funds activity. It's quite difficult to explain, but we do get, there is cross contamination as well, if to quote a phrase, because we've got schools and academies across borders who are impacted about this as well. So Leicestershire have some schools in their fund that are in Nottinghamshire. We likewise have schools in Leicestershire that are part of Nottinghamshire Multi-Academy Trust and things like that. So there's very much a cross-contamination of activity across the funds. But to tell you how much it's going to cost, we don't know. We do think, and I will say this, is that it was not going to affect individuals to a great extent. There will be some people, some pensioners possibly, who might be impacted, but there isn't going to be huge numbers. It's just we've got to check all the numbers to probably make not many changes, but I'm going to reserve judgment until we've got all the data.
Yes, Gordon.
On finance.
Well, can I just finish off answering that one first, please? The actuaries are well aware of the increase in liabilities we could have, but they've seen it as being small, so it's not significant. I believe is that the view. They don't whether it's 0.5%, 1%, whatever it is, but it is a small number. So that answers the other part of your question about the liabilities side of the fund. Sorry, another question. Yes.
It's just another financial question, and I'm grateful for the fact that it's not going to affect a lot of people by a huge amount. But do you envisage a situation where some people could be worse off?
I don't really want to say, Councillor, at the moment. I honestly don't know, so I'd be guessing. So I'd rather leave that question to another time.
And if there are those cases, that will come back to this committee, I would think. So, yeah, absolutely. Yes. Thank you very much, Gordon. Yes, Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Being in the pension industry myself, I know how difficult it is to actually find people. And I mean, you're looking for 5, I think it's 5. They're not, like I say, they're not on the shelf. The problem you've got is that they're at a premium, aren't they, everywhere? So how are you proposing to retain the staff that you already have who are going to be tempted to move away because the salary is going to be there? So that's a difficult one. I don't see you're going to get 5 people off the shelf within the next 2 years, and it's very difficult. How are you going to make the staff that you've got stay with us?
Well, apart from training them to the desks, I think actually if we have a look at our staffing group, whilst I said earlier we have a wide range of age profiles, and obviously we've considered that, I think our turnover of staff tends to be where people retire rather than them moving on elsewhere to other LGPS funds. Clearly, in the table that is proposed, it is more than 9 posts, and some of our more junior staff will see this as an opportunity of promotion to some of the higher graded posts. So I think there's a positive there in the fact that it should also be seen as a way of retaining staff as well. I think also there's an opportunity to bring new people in as well. Clearly, in reporting back to committee, we will update the committee on our success in recruiting. I think one important thing is to look at how we go out to advert and make something of our advert. Again, the recruitment service sits as part of my area of responsibility. We do use things such as Indeed, LinkedIn, etc. So obviously we will use all the appropriate channels. And obviously I would appeal to pension committee members themselves that it's an opportunity for you to, advertise these posts across your own constituencies as well, because Nottinghamshire is a great place to work, and you know, there is a a positive message there as well.
And thank you, Sarah. That's a really good sale. Well done. And I totally agree with every word that you said. It was brilliant. Thank you. Lee, I think you had another
Right,
brief.
thank you, Chairman. Very brief question. Just thinking about managing workloads and future workloads, if, as an example, a pension member transferred out, are you proactively doing calculations and trying to track down those ex-members, or are you waiting for them to contact you first and then doing any work which really may impact?
First of all, how can I answer that? We do track. We issue benefit statements each year to deferred members who are members who've potentially left the scheme. So we keep in contact with those on an annual basis. We do have missing members, and we do have ways in which we trace members. That's always a challenge for the pension fund, but we like to think that we do get most of it right in terms of tracing our ex-members. Like I say, we're going to be focusing on pensioners first of all, and new pensioners who are moving into pension, but we will be looking at all members, including deferreds.
Okay. Chair, if I may follow that up. So if a member historically had a CTV and transferred their final salary into a SIP or wherever else, can this ruling impact them, and will they need to contact you to get a calculation, and then that will impact the workload? That depends on the data that we get back from our scheme employers, and the regulations in relation to how we are going to be able to calculate or recalculate people's benefits. So if people have transferred out, we'll certainly be we're waiting for advice and support from the LGA on how to tackle certain cases. So that may be part of that.
None of this is unusual. This happens across the pension industry. So again, that's a bit of, yeah, okay. Did you want to add to that, Sarah? I think you indicated.
Yeah, I was just going to add 2 points. We have historically done a piece of work with Experian on lost contacts, looking at addresses, and again our data audit work that's running along in parallel with this is looking at addresses as well. Councillor Camilleri will be aware of, he contacted me recently about a member where we'd ceased paying his pension because the individual had moved address. We'd had a pay slip returned, so it's appropriate for us to stop payment until that person contacts us and we correct the address. So there is something on individuals having a personal responsibility to also keep the fund up to date about personal detail changes as well. But yes, we look at lots of things around that area.
And as we develop the member portal, that will help the communications with our members and improve that situation. Gordon, one last question, Gordon. One last comment, Gordon.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Comment was made earlier on about our staff and working overtime, etc. Now, we have a duty of care for our employees, very much, so that has to be paramount. So the sooner we can get these folk recruited, the better. Now, obviously, we've also got a hybrid working arrangement coming into place very soon. From September onwards, we've been looking at that very critically. That's already gone out to all the members. All councillors are aware of new working arrangements. It'll come back before personnel again in September. Sarah, again, sure you're aware of that. It's something we have to be focused on, mindful of. We're offering the people we recruit perhaps a different opportunity, the way they work, the way they've historically worked. And I think we are so far ahead of the game. Every council across the country, I think we are the leaders on this, and we must position ourselves in such a way to continue to be so. So we will be an attractive employer to work for, the new way of working. But we've had discussions, and we continue our discussions with the trade union side as well, all of them. So they're aware of what we're doing, how we're doing it, and the discussions will carry on, Sarah. So I think something you be mindful of when you're actually recruiting staff. Thank you, Sarah.
I'm sure she is, Gordon. Thank you very much for the help on that. I've taken that as a final question. We've really gone through it in a lot of detail, and the key point is making the right decision, I think. So, having discussed this, I would like to ask for your support in approving the recommendations, please. So, all those in favour, show by hands. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item number 6. It's the local government pension scheme pension scams. Again, very important, and I think there's a lot of good messages we can get out to the public about this one. Before Sarah presents the report, I'll just draw attention to the recommendations that are set out on page 23 and 24, and I will move those. I'll ask for a seconder.
I'll second that, Chair, and I'll reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Andre. Sarah, would you introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Councillor Kerry. So the purpose of this report is to update Pensions Committee on pension scams activities and the requirements of the Pension Regulator and Pension Scheme Act 2021. We're seeking approval to the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund committing to the Pension Regulator's pledge to combat pension scams. We're also seeking approval to from the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund to the Pension Scam Action Plan that is attached as Appendix 1 with your report. Excuse me. And we're also seeking approval to fund an additional technical and regulations officer to undertake the additional due diligence checks. There's quite a detailed background within the report, but it does actually detail some figures that have been produced by the Financial Conduct Authority and the Pension Regulator. So in August 2020, excuse me, around £30 million lost to pension scams was reported since 2017, according to complaints filed with Action Fraud. So the issue is truly likely to be much higher than this. Pension scams are on the increase, becoming more and more sophisticated. During the pandemic, the Pension Regulator, Financial Conduct Authority and the Money and Pension Scheme issued additional help and guidance to members of pension funds. As a fund, we have a duty of care to do what we can to support and protect our members. Key thing of paramount importance is educating our members to assist them in spotting scams. There are a number of common telltale signs, unsolicited approaches by various methods, not being able to call a company back, being forced to make a quick decision, being pressurised, being asked to send documents via courier, and many more. It is proposed that the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund commit to the Pension Regulator pledge to combat pension scams, thereby demonstrating its intent to protect its members. The report details the 3 steps required together with the actions that the fund would need to take and put in place. Also, the Pension Scheme Act of 2021, which received royal assent in February 2021, is primarily aimed at strengthening the powers of the pension regulator. The Act contains a specific provision regarding transfer scam prevention. The LGPS regulations to support the provision of the Act are expected to be in place in early autumn. These will remove statutory rights of a scheme member to transfer their pension out where there is no genuine employment link. There will also be additional requirements which administrators must work through, which are detailed at paragraph 26. The Work and Pensions Committee have also published their first part of the inquiry about protecting pension savers, and also the Pension Scams Industry Group have updated their voluntary code of good practice. To enable the Pension Office to implement increased due diligence checks and requirements on the pension front brought about by the Pension Scheme Act 2021, the Fund's duty of care and obligations to protect its members, delivery of an action plan attached, there is a requirement for an additional technical and regulations officer. This will then provide the Fund with sufficient resource to deliver on the proposals outlined in this report. Again, we have considered the other options. One is clearly to do nothing. This is not a viable option and may potentially expose the Fund and members to undue risk, reputational damage and action by the pension regulator. Other option would be to absorb the work into the Pensions Office. However, I think this morning we've had quite a debate about that, again, also not being a feasible option. So the recommendations in the report are for Pensions Committee to consider if there are any further actions they would like to be brought forward. Approve the pension fund's commitment to the pension regulator's pledge to combat pension scams. Approve the pension scam action plan attached to Appendix 1 and agree to the funding for an additional technical and regulations officer within the Pensions Office. And finally, to agree to include within our annual performance report an update on pension scams on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll now open it up to questions, comments. Gordon?
Hello, Sarah. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. A few years ago, I had the portfolio for trading standards. I just wonder what communication is between ourselves and trading standards. Trading standards come across scams every day of the week. I know you know that, Sarah. And I'm not suggesting for one moment that this is something specific that they are dealing with, but they've got a wealth of experience on scams. And I know they're very proactive in the way they deal with, particularly the elderly who are exposed to scams. I just wonder whether we actually have contacted trading standards and are working with them so that we get some joined up thinking on this, Sarah. Thank you.
Yes, obviously we do know Mark Walker, and obviously we're aware of the activity that they have within this arena as well. Obviously the pension regulator puts out a lot of information on a regular basis as well. There is the Scam Smart campaign as well, but definitely we will continue our links in with trading standards.
Yes, Gordon.
Thank you. It's an important report and it's diabolical when it happens to people. Wearing my district council hat, all the district councils in Nottinghamshire are members of your scheme. They have got, most of the district councils I know of, to speak about Rushcliffe, an extremely good communication system with all our staff in terms of being in touch with them, payroll, all this sort of stuff. What are you doing now to talk to district council people to aid you in this worthwhile project?
Thank you, Gordon. Sarah? Oh, sorry, John. Yeah.
Sorry, just in terms of the communication, Councillor Moore, we do have discussions with the personnel group across the districts, which Sarah attends, and we do update them on some of the activities that we're undertaking. This year, we are communicating to all pension members, active members who have a benefit statement, and there is a document going out with their benefit statements to actually draw their attention to the pensions regulator and to pension scams. So everybody within the fund who's active will receive communication on pension scams this year. We've done it in the past. This is just, we're enhancing our communication. So you're quite right. We do talk to the districts. We do tell them what's going on. Obviously, the districts are, how many of them? 5. We've got 300 scheme employers within the fund, and we do communicate out to all scheme employers about our activities on a regular basis. But specifically, we're targeting members this year.
Yes, just a
very brief one on that. Yeah, that's fantastic. Excellent work. I'm thinking about the people who haven't quite retired yet. Let's say the over 50s and those in the district council. I'm looking at you. I'm thinking of those people who are making future plans. And I really think they're the kind of people who we should be targeting pre-retirement, because they're the ones the scammers will be trying to get hold of nearer their retirement date. By the time they do, it's too late.
So all members of the fund, so including those yet to retire, will receive those communications. But I think there's another opportunity, Gordon, and your authority can liaise with Nottinghamshire Pension Fund, and include some of our comms, some of our social media stuff on your social media, and actually to help get that message out there. I think that's a useful comment.
Yeah, pleased. We were very, very pleased to do that.
Thank you.
And see, I'm cabinet member for finance at Rushcliffe,
Sure.
so I'll be very happy to take that back to our officers there and say, yeah, let's get on board with it. And I'm sure other members here from other districts, from your own districts, will be saying, let's get on board with this and get it to all our employees, because we owe it to them.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much for that.
I don't think you need to add to that, Sarah, do you? No. Any other questions, comments? Mike?
Comments more than questions. Recommendations 5. Agree with the inclusion of an update. I think that's a must. We need to be fully aware of that. 4. Funding the additional post. Yeah, that's got to happen. I would think the post needs to make decisions, and they're going to be fluid decisions that need to be reactive. So I would think that we're going to have a report which will be historical on the actions that the post takes. Pension funds, pension scheme action plan, that ticks every box at the minute, and again I think that's going to be fluid. Pension funds regulations pledge, yeah, that's got to work. Again, I think it ties in with partners more than anything else. And the last one, to consider if there are any further actions, what I would suggest is that you contact Priti Patel and put a 100-year jail sentence with hard labour on anybody that scams anybody out of the pension.
Thank you, Mike. I don't think anybody needs to come back on that. I think we're in agreement with you there. Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments at this stage? No, I don't see any more. So Andre, yes.
It's something that's close to my heart. I've seen it for a long time. I think scam's a funny word. When you talk about scam, you think of somebody scamming you, sending you phone messages and do that. I think persuasion is another thing. And I think that it's something it's like a volcano, it's ready to go off. If we have a prolonged drop in the stock market, you're going to get a lot of people ringing you up who've transferred their pension out. And when somebody, a middle manager, goes and sees the amount of money that is worth, when you crystallise it and when you find out it's worth £1 million, that's a temptation. And a sophisticated salesman from whatever, who's making between 1% and 3%, has a persuasive way of talking, and it's obvious. So I think we've not only got to be careful of the scammers, we've got to be careful of the persuaders. Somebody over 50, got a mortgage, got kids, you've got £500,000 here, you crystallise it, or 55, you can get a load of money, is what you do. Now, the trouble is a lot of these people are quite intelligent, and when the market dips, they will be the first to complain. And I think we've got to be wary of that. And the industry are good at telling you how good they are. That we do that, we cover it off, we do the letters, we do everything. But when they're looking at £20,000 to £30,000 worth commission, I'm afraid a lot of that goes out the window. And that is not, they are not scammers, they are normal salesmen. So we have to be very aware. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andre. Very important point. Okay, so we've discussed it well. Now I'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show with your hands. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, local government pension funding strategy statement update, item number 7. Again, John, I think you're going to present before, so I'll move the recommendations, which are on page 32. No, thank you very much.
And reserves the right to speak.
Okay, would you like to introduce the report, John?
Thank you, Chair. I'll make this as brief as possible. The purpose of the report is to inform the committee of changes to the funding strategy statement. And my computer's just gone. Sorry. Just bear with me. Sorry, apologies. Sorry about that. So the purpose of the report is to inform the committee of changes to the funding strategy statement, which includes 3 policies which are attached to assist the pension fund in manage a cessation of scheme employees within the fund, along with enabling the fund to review contributions by scheme employees between scheme valuations. This change has come about due to changes in regulations The Pension Fund Actuary has also been closely involved in the preparation of the revisions to the funding strategy statement and in writing the attached policies. The main changes in the strategy statement are amending the wording of the statement to allow for the revision of scheme employer contributions between valuations, amending the statement to allow spreading of exit payments where appropriate, and amending the wording to allow for deferred debt agreements where appropriate. Alongside the changes, the funding strategy statement, there are the policies, as I mentioned previously, which set out how the pension fund will enter into monitoring and terminating of deferred debt agreements or debt spreading agreements to ensure that the pension liabilities are covered should employers cease their membership of the fund. The strategy policy documents have been distributed to all scheme employers for consultation, and additionally, Nigel Stevenson has raised the consultation at a county-wide finance meeting, which includes all the district councils. The pension fund awaits responses to the consultation, which ends tomorrow. And following the consultation, the plan is that the strategy and policies will be finalised and included in the strategy reports in September. So this is really a report for information as such, in terms of this is what we've done. These are the policies that we've sent out for consultation, and once we have had that consultation, we'll bring it back for finalisation.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's a very simple report. I don't think we need to do really much action on that apart from moving the recommendation, which I've moved, and we've had seconded. So all those in favour, please. Oh, sorry, I didn't see an indication. Apologies, Anne. Apologies, I didn't see your hand before.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if there was any initial feedback we're getting from the consultation, and has the consultation just gone out to employers, or have you included other stakeholders like trade unions?
In terms of the consultation, it's just gone out to scheme employers, as that is what we're required to do as part of the consultation process. That's all I can say.
I did move the vote, and can we just indicate, please, if we're all in favour? Thank you. Okay, moving on to the item number 8 is proxy voting. I think, Keith, are you doing this report? So before I hand over to Keith, if I'd like to set out the recommendations which are on page 82 of the agenda pack. Keith, over to you. No, oh, sorry, second. Yeah, we'll look to second recommendation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The fund has responsibility for voting any directly held shares. Voting is undertaken on the fund's behalf by Hermes EOS in line with the voting principles of LGPS Central. An overview of the Hermes EOS voting activity and analysis of the key issues is published on the fund's website on a quarterly basis. Some additional data has been included in the report to provide more information of the issues on which Hermes EOS has chosen to vote against or abstain. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Keith. We'll open that up to any questions or comments, please, from any members. Mike?
Yeah, it's always been positive. I found the proxy voting has always been positive, to be quite honest. But it'd be nice for us to have a quick overview as to the pros and cons as to what Hermes has done, if that's possible, included within the papers, annually or whatever, if that's possible. I think we've asked for that before, actually.
I think we've brought more information before. As I say, it's all on the website, but certainly if people would like it included in the report, we can put some appendices in there to give more information.
It's regularly updated.
Yeah, I get that. I'm just in a pensions committee, apart from anybody else. And if we're here and there's a report on it, it'd be nice just to have a flick through, just to have a check. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If possible.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much, Mike. Any other questions, comments, please? Lee.
Yeah, I completely agree. I would like it presented in this meeting what they are proxy voting on. Are we talking about directors' pay? What is the positive or so-called negative engagement? So I think for the pension committee, it needs to be a bit more transparent than putting it on a website where not everyone's going to see it in time for the meeting. So on this particular item, I'm going to abstain on it.
Thank you for that comment.
We can certainly do that. Obviously, it'll be a lot of information because we do a lot. There's lots of voting taking place, but we can certainly provide more information for the committee in future reports.
I think there's a massive amount of work being done. So really, it's about focusing on the key issues and getting some, rather than going to in massive detail, we can do that. There will be a hell of a lot of detail about the individual votes and what they really mean and whether those are working in the longer term on some of those governance issues that we're looking at. So
A summary would be nice, Chairman.
yeah, okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments, please? No, okay. So we've moved the recommendation. Can I see all those in favour, please? Any abstentions? Any against? Is that an abstention or against? Thank you. Okay, that's carried. Question, item number 9 is local pension fund forum business meeting. Again, Keith, this is your report, so I'll move the recommendation on page 86. Ask for a seconder, please.
I'll second that and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Keith.
Thank you, Chair. The Local Authority Pension Fund Forum was formed in 1990 to provide an opportunity for the UK's local authority pension funds to discuss investment and shareholder engagement issues. LAPF exists to assist administering authorities to discharge their statutory responsibilities and promote the long-term investment interests of UK local authority pension funds. The meeting reported on here was held in April via Zoom and was attended by an officer representative. The agenda of the meeting included, among other things, a particular focus on climate. Many fossil fuel companies are now putting climate-related resolutions before shareholders at their AGMs as part of the Say on Climate campaign, and LAPF has cautiously welcomed this. However, LAPF maintained that it isn't appropriate to give credit to companies for merely recognising climate change exists. Further, it expressed a wariness about nature-based solutions to carbon capture, such as reforestation, citing that this strategy could be used by some companies to prolong their extraction of fossil fuels. The headline engagement story related to National Grid's promotion of a Say on Climate resolution at its AGM, which permitted shareholders to vote on the company's climate change-related targets and action plan. LAPF continues to engage with National Grid, particularly with regard to its US electricity and gas distribution business and the carbon intensity of heating UK homes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Keith. They do a lot of very good work. I attended virtually the last meeting quite a few days ago. It was very interesting and raised some questions at that time. I think you can watch a recording of that if you wish. Any questions or comments, please? Mike.
Yeah, I think members that have not been involved in LAPF really ought to have, because it is, I've been with Kieran a couple of times, it is a powerful and they hold a lot of responsibility. In fact, paragraph 2 says that, consequently able to exert significant influence over companies. That's a powerful statement these days, and it invariably gets tied in with specifics. So I think it's important that members understand what LAPF actually does and our involvement with that.
Yeah, and that ties in with the presentation that we're going to see later on in the meeting too. So yes, thank you very much. Any other questions? Lee?
There are elements I agree with and I disagree with. I think we can positively engage with a number of companies. Some companies, I'd argue that we should just completely disinvest from, such as fossil fuels, and not get involved in whatsoever. So again, I'm in two minds about this report. There's certainly a lot of benefit that can be done with engaging companies, but it's what companies are we engaging, and should we be invested in fossil fuel companies? I would say no. So for me, we can't positively engage with some of those companies. Thank you.
I understand your comment, and that I understand your passion for the subject you just mentioned. There is a lot of really good work, and if you look at some of the recent results in boardrooms and changes in terms of climate strategies, carbon neutral strategies for companies, we'll hear more again, I think, late in the RI part of the next presentation. So understand your comments. I'd love to be able to help you understand the benefits in terms of transition that are being whatever. And I know you don't agree with me on that, but that you know that's your view. Any other questions or comments?
Just a comment. These companies, the carbon who deal with carbon things, they're in transition as well, aren't they? And what they're trying to do is become environmentally friendly and move on. So we disinvest from their company. Yeah. They can't do that. And our job is to stay with it and make them understand the importance of clean air, clean everything, environment. So I think by disinvesting, just making a carte blanche thing, it's an easy thing to do. But disinvest out, you just can't do that. Because these companies need our money to do research, to work at it, to make it things. And if we just take our money out, that won't work.
I don't really want to debate about this in here, Lee. I don't think anything can be.
I'm quite happy to come back, Chairman, if you'd let me.
Very briefly, please.
Really, I think we need to look at thematic investing and looking at trends. For example, we know China are aiming to be carbon neutral by 2060, USA by 2030, reduce their emissions by half, UK and the EU by 2035. So for me, disinvesting out of fossil fuels is getting ahead of the curve. And I would do that now, and I'd look to invest more in robotics and things like that. So that's going slightly off the point. I do see a benefit of positively engaging companies, but some companies we just shouldn't be invested in, and we can get ahead of the curve like other pension funds are currently doing, such as the Scottish scheme.
Thanks for your comments, Lee. Those are considered as we address our climate action. So, any other questions, comments? No. So I'll move the recommendation, which was we'll consider the report. All those in favour, please. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, Lee. That is carried. Okay, we now move on to item number 10. We have Joanne and Mike here, and the rest of the team are virtual. So I think I still do need to ask for the recommendation to be moved, which is on page 89. So we'll consider the presentation and ask for a seconder, please.
I'll second that, Chair, and reserve the right.
With no further ado, Joanne, may I hand over to yourself and Mike?
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Kerry, and thank you very much for the invitation to come up to see you all today. It's lovely to see you all in person and to see some new faces, but also some very familiar faces here today. As I say, thanks very much for having us all, because hearing directly from you, hearing directly from elected members is a really important part of what we do at LGPS Central for you, but also how we do it. So it's a very, very important occasion for us. So thank you very much. Can I just check, Councillor Kerry, how long we've got for this item? Because as you know, we can talk
30 minutes in total.
30 minutes, brilliant. Because as you know, we can talk all day about this if we wanted to. But we'll stick to 30 minutes. So my colleague Cara is controlling the slides remotely, and you'll hear from Patrick later where he will pick up this issue that we've just been talking about, you've just been talking about on responsible investment and engagement. So Cara, could we have the next slide, please? Perfect. So what we're going to talk to you about today is really to give you an update on the company's progress to date at a pool level, but also Nottinghamshire Pension Fund level. You can tell I've not been out much, I can't actually speak. And also to really think about future developments, where we've been, but where we're going. But it's really important too that we can hear from you today. So please do make sure that you get the opportunity to get your views across to us. So Cara, if we could go down to slide 4, please, that would be really super. And I suppose that the really starting point for us in all of this is really our raison d'etre. And our raison d'etre is to be your asset manager and the asset manager for the pool of the 8 partner funds who form LGPS Central. And really, we have no other role than that, to be here to serve your needs. And that absolutely means working in partnership with you and with the other partner funds that comprise LGPS Central to deliver the funds and services that you want and need. So this isn't just about whatever bright ideas Mike and his colleagues might have. This is absolutely about making sure that we can meet your needs and ensure that you can meet your pension fund obligations, but also hopefully lighten the load. I mean, clearly, I've been very, very aware of all the issues that you're facing as a pension fund, but hearing those firsthand today on McLeod, GMPs, the volume of work that's coming your way, scams as well, the volume of work that's coming your way is absolutely enormous. And so, I think part of our role too, particularly on responsible investment, is to help lighten the load for you as a pension fund. And it's that partnership that really sits at the heart of this. So if I may, Councillor Kerry, I'd also just like to place on record our thanks to the team here, to Nigel, to Keith, to Tamsin, of course to yourself, and to Councillor Adair, who was in this at the very start, the beginning of the beginning, to really the work that you've done with us, because it's that partnership that's really been core to the success that we've had. So, Cara, if we can move on to the next slide. I thought it might just be helpful to take a step back and to reflect on our development, because whilst on the one hand it feels like we've been at this for some long time, actually we're still a relatively new company. We only went live on the 1st of April 2018, and so since then we've been really working on establishing ourselves as an organisation, making sure we've got all the right people and moving parts in place, to transition the initial slew of assets over to us, in particular to the traditional asset classes, equities, passive equities, bonds. Where we are now is in that green box that you can see. And that's really about additional asset transitions, and also launching into newer and more perhaps sophisticated asset classes, private markets, for example, infrastructure. I was particularly pleased earlier this year when we launched our first infrastructure fund. And our next phase is really going to be about business as usual. How do we move from this startup organisation into business as usual? And so standing back, today we're an organisation responsible for £22 billion, just over £22 billion of partner fund money, working across 11 sub-funds that we've established for partner funds, including Nottinghamshire Pension Fund. And we're an organisation of just under 70 people. So let me talk very briefly, if I may, about how we're doing against our work priorities that have been set for us and agreed with us by our partner funds this year. And Mike and Patrick are going to go into more detail on that, and I don't want to steal their thunder, so I'll just touch on these very briefly. So, Cara, if we may have the next slide, thank you. And the first point, and the point that we always come back to, and it's the first objective that we set for ourselves along with partner funds in our work programme this year, is this point that I've been talking about already, which is about making sure that we can work closely with all our partner funds, including yourselves, to make sure that we can develop the right products for you, that we can monitor those products, but also that we're reporting back to you in a very open and transparent manner on how those funds are performing, on issues like how we are engaging with the companies in which we invest. And that's about making sure that we can work in partnership with you across the piece, individually, but also collectively. And as you can see from our second work objective this year, responsible investment is absolutely at the heart of everything we do, whether that's about making sure that any of the funds we launch achieve our RI integrated status, whether that's about launching new funds, and Mike's going to talk about our Sustainable Equities Fund in a moment, whether that's about engagement with companies. It's absolutely at the heart of everything that we do, and we know how important that is to you as a pension fund, but also to our other partner funds. So that's absolutely at the heart of what we do. But it's also about helping you manage the additional responsibilities that are placed on you as a fund, whether that's reporting against TCFD, whether that's engaging with some of the other reporting that pension funds now have to do. And I know as a trustee myself, just how important it is to get that right and the additional responsibility that brings and the additional work that brings to pension funds. So again, we're working in very close partnership with our partner funds to help with those reporting issues. But of course, this is also about the management of assets and the performance of those assets, because it's that performance that will enable you to pay the pensions that you're responsible for. And despite very, very tough market conditions, actually our funds are performing very well. So, for example, 7 of 8 of our active funds are ahead of their benchmark already. And so we're keeping a very, very close watch on all of our managers, both the funds that we manage internally, but also those external managers that we have appointed. So, Cara, if I could have the next slide. We've got a very, very busy year ahead of us in terms of launching new funds. We've programmed 5 funds already this year. We've got a further 4 funds to launch over the remainder of this year, and Mike's going to pick that up in a minute. But really, to achieve all that we have achieved over the last 3, nearly 4 years, has been about partnership with you as our partner funds, say individually and collectively. But it's also about having strong operational systems and internal controls. And I'm pleased to say that we have that. Now, that's not just me saying that, because you might say, well, she would say that, wouldn't she? But it's actually about making sure that we can demonstrate that. And we have, in fact, we're the only asset pool to have done this, to have had an external assessment of our internal controls through what's called an AAF report. And that came back and gave us an unqualified report. So there were no particular concerns that the external evaluators had about that. And I think that's very, very important. It's very, very important for us to demonstrate, to reassure ourselves that we have strong internal controls. But I think also from your perspective as investors into LGPS Central, I hope reassurance to you too. But of course, the other thing that enables us to do that is our people. One of my fellow non-executive directors always says, you know, the only asset we have isn't the 22 billion that we're responsible for. They're your assets. Our assets are our people. And, you know, we've recruited some really, really high caliber people, both from the public sector, but from the private sector too, working together. And I've been enormously proud of the work that they've done over the last 18 months, working from home, keeping the show on the road, launching new products and making sure that we can keep that partnership with you, our partner funds, absolutely at the heart of what we're doing. So having recruited these people, and I'm struck by the conversation you've been having about people today, our task now is to really keep them and motivate them and provide LGPS Central as a real sort of career opportunity for them. So that's something which occupies a lot of mine and Mike's and my board's time. So that's all I wanted to say by way of an introduction, and I'm going to hand over to Mike, who's going to talk to you in more detail about the funds that we're launching.
Just before we do that, would it be okay? Does anybody have any questions for Joanne at this stage about the philosophy of LGPS Central or any of the comments she made? And I think the important thing is that you mentioned compliance and governance. It's not only important for us as investors, it's also important for us as shareholders of LGPS Central. I think it's very important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. And it's something which, you know, we take very, very seriously indeed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Chair. And I just echo Joanne's words. It's really nice to be sitting here in person talking to you after 18 months of operating via a screen. So that's fantastic. Joanne has given you a brief look back at where we came from and the philosophies underlying the company. What I'd like to do in these next 2 slides is just quickly give you a view about what's happening next. So, Cara, if we can have slide 9, please. As Joanne's mentioned, we've got quite a busy period between now and the end of the calendar year in terms of launching new products that are the products that you and the other partner funds within LGPS Central need to ensure that the asset allocation that you need in terms of operating your fund, that we can provide the funds that will enable you to do that. So we've got 5 listed here, three of which we understand are of interest to the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund. The private equity fund which we had a very successful start to the initial 2018-19 private equity funds. We're launching another vintage, so repeating the operations, and we're hoping that will launch end of July, early August. We're going through the final approvals process for that now. Sustainable equity, the product there within the dotted green box, is really important for us as a business and for all of the partners within LGPS Central. So it's really focusing on global sustainability, how that's delivered through equity markets. And we've spent an awful lot of time and effort with all the partner funds in specifying how that fund can be put together to deliver the needs that you all have. So we're very excited about this fund coming along. It's going to be launched in the second half of this year, and it will pick up all the elements that we've been talking about, and Patrick will pick up on in terms of RI going forwards. And then property, the one at the bottom. Property is really complex asset class. Historically, it's quite expensive, but also across the pool, most partner funds have investments in property, either directly or indirectly. There are some expensive tax wrinkles in transitioning property. So again, this is a fund that we really need to work very closely with all partner funds to make sure that the fund does the job and is effective and efficient. So we're working on those three, particularly. We've launched private debt, the one at the top, and we will have more assets coming into that fund. It's off to a positive start in terms of selecting the managers to operate in private debt space. And targeted return is a more niche product. A couple of partner funds are interested in that, but at a relatively sizable amount of money, so circa 700 million. And that is expected to launch early in 2022. So it's a busy period, and probably the most busy period for funds and things. In terms of Joanne's flowchart, things start reducing in terms of intensity in number of new product launches as we go forwards. Alongside new funds, if we move on to slide 10, please, Cara. Alongside the new funds, we have a very clear organisational focus looking forward. As well as launching the new funds, we need to manage and focus on delivering the investment performance of the funds that are already transitioned to Central. And Joanne's giving you a brief snapshot of performance on the funds, and I know you have dedicated investment performance meetings and go through that in more detail. But suffice it to say, they're doing well. Philosophically, we are very much around looking at satisfying the fiduciary duties that we have as a manager and you have as a pension fund, but also making sure that they fit with our responsibilities to society in terms of the planet that people are going to retire into. So conscious that that's a very big theme for yourselves here. We mentioned RI integrated status. We're also doing a lot of work on net zero alignments, offsetting carbon pricing, and Patrick will talk more about those things in a moment. But it's at the heart of what we do as a company. And Joanne's mentioned our people. As she said, they are the only asset we have, and the key thing is to have the right people with the right capabilities in the right role to deliver the programme that we've got. And so we'll be very focused on continuing that going forward. At that point, it's probably best that I transfer to Patrick because he can focus very much on RI. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, at this point from me, if there are any.
Any questions for Mike? No? Okay, thank you, Mike. If you want to bring Patrick on board.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm sorry I can't be there with you. Cara, if you'd like to move on to the first slide. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you. For those of you I have not met yet, I joined LGPS Central at the beginning of the year from USS Investment Management, where I was responsible for ESG integration and stewardship in public markets. And prior to that, I had a spell at Aviva Investors, where I did a similar role. So I'm delighted to be here working with the team at LGPS Central. So just by way of introduction, I just want to reiterate the fact that, responsible investment has been around for quite some time. It pre-existed the pools in terms of the impact and contribution that local authority pension schemes were having. And responsible investment started off as very niche. It started off really about exclusions and not investing in certain sectors. And gradually over time, it's become more mainstream. And asset owners and particularly local authority pension schemes have played a fundamental role in the mainstreaming of responsible investment, demanding that engagement is impactful and focused, and also demanding that environmental, social and governance issues are integrated into the investment process, both as a risk management tool, but also to enhance investment returns. And the Local Authority Pension Fund Forum has been, played a central role since 1990 in those engagements, in very ambitious and impactful engagements. Recent examples of that are engaging following the Samarco tailings dam disaster and the Brumigino tailings dam disaster. After a lot of investors focused on other things, LAP remained involved, making sure that the reparations and the remediation work continued. And also in the occupied Palestinian territories, where it's quite a sensitive and difficult subject, LAP has shown real leadership in that engagement. And our engagements, we go through a process with the partner funds to identify our engagement priorities. So we've identified climate change, single-use plastics, tax and technology as being areas of focus. That's not the only thing we focus on. Health and safety and human rights are also important issues that we embrace through our engagements. But I think the key message is that for LAP to do its work and to engage with these companies, someone within the local authority pension scheme space has to own the company, and that's critical. In the absence of ownership, it's very difficult to engage and influence companies. So just moving on to the next slide, please, Cara. And so just to give you some background as to how we approach things, as you know, most of our assets are managed externally. We manage our passive portfolios, those portfolios that track an index internally. So you can split our responsible investment process down into what we do pre-investment and what we do post-investment. So pre-investment is all about selection, and it's all about due diligence and making sure that we get the investment managers on board that have the capabilities, the systems, the processes, and also the conviction around the importance of responsible investment and ESG integration. So we do a lot of due diligence work prior to investment. So that's on the external managers there, as you see on the slide. But with the internal portfolios, those passive portfolios, we make sure we set those up properly so that we can vote all of the companies, and we take our voting responsibilities very seriously. At LGP Essential, we see that as a key engagement tool. But also, we've launched tilted portfolios, the Climate Multi-Factor Fund, and we're also looking at other options in that space now. And we work closely with that investment team to develop those solutions and to really kick the tires on the propositions that the external managers bring to us, because there's lots of solutions out there that don't quite deliver what we're looking for. So we help them very much with that. And then post-investment, it's really all about the stewardship that we do. So the engagement that you've been talking about already today. So this could be direct engagement with the companies that we hold, through partnerships, through industry participation. And we also engage with those external managers. So we monitor their performance on a responsible investment metric. The RI integrated status, as Joanne mentioned earlier, we meet with them on a quarterly basis and do an annual review of that status to make sure they're really delivering on our expectations and what they told us they would do at the outset of our relationship with them. And then also, as I mentioned, we take very seriously our voting responsibilities, and we identify particular companies where we want to use that vote strategically, and we integrate environmental and social considerations into our voting. For example, we recently voted against a chairman of a company because the company was not very proactive in terms of their response to our letters and our engagement requests. And we'll continue to do that. We will use our votes for that purpose. So moving on to the next slide, Cara. So one of the questions that often comes up is whether engagement is actually working, whether it actually delivers. And I fundamentally think it's a very important part of being a responsible investor. And it can take time. As somebody mentioned earlier in the discussion, this is a transition to a lower carbon economy, and an economy that's been predicated on the burning of fossil fuels doesn't change overnight. It takes time, and these large companies need to transition over a period of time, as do governments, and most of the oil reserves that have actually been explored are owned by governments. So this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It takes a prolonged and determined period of engagement from investors. But these companies are going to be owned by somebody, and that's how we should view this. We are owners. We're not shareholders. We're not speculators in the share price of these companies. We are owners, and we should behave as such, taking a long-term view of the performance of the company and taking into consideration the interests of other stakeholders. So not just shareholder rights, but the rights of employees, the rights of customers, the rights of the local communities in which these companies operate. And that requires a long-term view. And I think this voting season has been particularly interesting. I mean, we saw Shell and the case brought to the courts in the Netherlands that's demanding Shell embrace a trajectory on their carbon emissions that is in line with Paris. We saw a shareholder resolution at Shell win 31% of support, basically asking for the same thing. Now, a few years ago, 31% was unheard of for these sort of shareholder resolutions. We're seeing this stuff becoming mainstream. We're seeing the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard and the big asset owners supporting these resolutions, which is a really interesting development. I think we've entered into a key stage in the evolution of responsible investment. You know, Total Energies has changed its strategy, changed its name. It's recognised that the writing on the wall for oil and gas is quite clear, and it's been public in its determination to evolve into an energy company. And the last few days, it entered into a JV with an Indian energy company called Adani to push out and accelerate renewable energy in India, which is a really important thing that needs to happen if we're going to achieve climate reduction targets outlined at Paris. And you will have seen at ExxonMobil this year, a very small hedge fund that owns 0.02% of the company managed to get 3 carbon or climate aware non-executive directors elected to the board. And that was a really important initiative. Exxon spent $30 million trying to fight that shareholder resolution, put a lot of pressure on the CEO because ultimately it was unsuccessful. And next year, no doubt, the responsible investment community will go again and try and get more forward-thinking non-executive directors onto the board of Exxon. So it's important that we continue that discussion and that debate and infiltrate those companies with people who are prepared to take a holistic, longer-term view of the role of that company in society. And Exxon has been a notable laggard in that regard. With Barclays, we co-filed a shareholder resolution in 2020 asking Barclays to integrate science-based targets into their lending decisions. And that's a really important initiative as well, because there are lots of companies we can influence as investors, but we can't influence those companies that aren't listed, that we can't hold shares in, and they get their financing from the banks. And it's really important. We're shareholders in banks. It's really important we influence banks to act responsibly in lending, and that's important in the transition to a lower carbon economy, but also in other issues around palm oil. A lot of the really egregious practices there are by companies that aren't really listed. And we saw similar shareholder resolutions at Chevron, a shareholder resolution at Chevron asking the company to set targets around its scope 3 emissions, so the emissions associated with its products when they're being burned or used, got 61% support. So again, more evidence of this becoming mainstream. And as you will have seen, Rio Tinto, the CEO, the chairman's leaving this year, and 2 senior executives left the organisation because of the disastrous issue with the Aboriginal caves that were demolished for exploration. So again, I would have thought 2 or 3 years ago that wouldn't have been the outcome of that issue. But now we are seeing a lower tolerance for these this sort of behaviour amongst mainstream investors. So I would argue that this is a critical time now for engagement, for responsible investment, and for active ownership. Would you move on to the next slide, please, Cara? And just some examples of the organisations that we interact with in order to influence government and government policy. I mean, an individual engagement with a company can change the behaviour and the disclosure of that company, but if you engage with policymakers, you can influence a whole market. And we've seen, I think, important developments in emerging markets and other Asian markets, such as Japan, where the standards of corporate governance and diversity have improved rapidly over the last 3 to 5 years, and that's really around listing authorities and other government agencies engaging with responsible investors about what type of disclosure is needed for us to make informed investment decisions. So that's another thing that we take seriously and work with others to develop. Carl, would you like to move on? Yes, so handing over to Mike, but I'm more than happy to take questions at this point in time or after Mike's summary.
Any questions for Patrick? Anybody at this stage? I don't see any, Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Chair. I'm just conscious of time, so this will be a very quick summary, which is that we have developed over time, I think, as Joanna's mentioned, a strong relationship with yourselves at the Nottingham Pension Fund. It's not something we take for granted. We will keep focused on working on that relationship, both as you are owners of the business, as shareholders, and also clients of the business, and you invest with us on that basis. So we're very aware of those dual roles, and we will seek to meet your needs in both of those roles as we go forward. Part of that is continuing to develop products that you need to satisfy your strategic asset allocation, and part of it is the focus on responsible investing to make sure we're doing what you need as an aware pension scheme. So at that point, I'll stop. Joanna and I are very happy to take any questions, equally Cara and Patrick, on the video link.
Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, first off, the Sustainable Fund sounds like a positive step, but I'd like to see a lot more underneath the bonnet of that fund in due course. There's a lot of greenwashing in ESG, and are these so-called sustainable funds actually sustainable or not? So it'd be interesting to know what kind of engagement the Sustainable Fund is looking at doing once it's launched, and any positive or negative screening of taking out particular companies. To me, though, when you've actually got passive trackers running alongside a sustainable fund, it's almost like somebody saying, I'd like a Sunday dinner, but 2/3 of it vegetarian. Well, what's actually being achieved? And looking at asset allocation of fiduciary duties, I fully accept where I think last month we were talking about moving out of the UK and into other parts of the world. Fair enough. But if you underline look at the assets, a company like BHP, that's one of the UK's biggest coal miners, well, one of the world's biggest coal miners, not core to their business. It doesn't actually necessarily come in screening when you look at coal miners, but that's on the UK market. It's traded on the US market. It's traded on the Australian market. Shell's traded in 3 different markets. So when you are doing a rebalance, you're actually selling out the company to buy it again in another index tracker. So you're not necessarily achieving. So broadly, I like the sound of the Sustainable Fund, but again, it comes back to we need to look at disinvesting. Part of the problem is these passive trackers who are running alongside. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Do you wish to come back on that? I'm sure that you are considering those in the product development.
Very much so. Very much. I'd very much take your point, Councillor Waters, about greenwashing. The 2 thrusts in the development of the Sustainable Fund. One is to make sure that, because sustainability is a very broad term and different people view it in different ways, so different funds within LGPS Central view it in different ways. So we need to understand exactly where you are all coming from to make sure we suit your needs, and then making sure in terms of, so that's the design of the product, and there are going to be various different sleeves within that to satisfy different needs. And then once it's actually up and running, in terms of selecting the managers, you're absolutely right. There is an awful lot of greenwashing around. So it's really, really important that we get underneath the bonnet, make sure that the managers are doing what they say they're doing, and that we understand exactly how they're doing. And Patrick and his team are completely integrated in the design of that product. So we would very much welcome coming to you and describing in detail what that product is once we've finished its design and we know who the managers are going to be and how they're going to operate.
Just to add, we have been involved in the creation of the desire to go down that sustainable route, you know, in getting to this stage already. So yes, continue with that process.
Yeah, and it goes back very much to the point I was making about, you know, this is a partnership. This isn't just about us designing what we think is right for you. This is about doing this in partnership. And, you know, just to underline the point that Mike made, you know, there is an awful lot of greenwashing, and that's not what we're about. So, it's, you know, and that's why it's so critical that we listen to you as we move forward with this.
But we're also not in the game of reverse greenwashing. So ArcelorMittal, for example, steel manufacturing, have already planned to open their first solar-powered hydrogen-producing steel plant in Spain in a couple of years. So, and that's because of engagement and through LAP, for example. And so we need to share those positive transition benefits down this road.
Exactly, and it comes back to the point that was made about the transition, and one of the alphabet soup initials that or groups that Patrick didn't quite make it to Patrick's slide is the involvement we've got with the Transition Pathway Initiative, which is about, you know, how you get to that just transition. I know you've been involved in some discussions about that elsewhere, because it's important that we sort of see this in that broader context.
Yeah, thank you. Anne.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, how do you measure how effective your engagement is, and how can you assure this committee that it's effective?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a really good question, and it's a challenge that the whole of the responsible investment industry faces, really. We do try and set objectives for our engagements, and we do try and track them through. And we do identify where the engagement isn't working, and we will accelerate and we will, you know, move to voting against senior management within an organisation where that's not the case. It's also, you know, one of the important things about engagement, one of the things we ask for is disclosure, and making sure that companies disclose key metrics on health and safety, on climate, and on other factors. And I think it's true to say that once companies start measuring these things, you can't manage what you can't measure. And once they're forced to disclose this information, that's a real incentive for them to start improving the performance. And we do look at, you know, one of the things we're working on at the moment is a spreadsheet that will track the climate performance of a company over time, and to see the improvement in their scope 1 and 2 emissions, and where the data is available, their scope 3 emissions. And that's an important thing in terms of understanding the transition to net zero. So we do track the performance of the companies on those key metrics.
Could I just ask a follow-up? How standardised are those metrics? Because I'm sure there must be quite a lot of difference between different sectors.
Yeah, true. You're absolutely right. I mean, we wouldn't, if we were engaging with a financial services company, it's unlikely to be around their emissions, because they're not a heavily emitting company or sector. So those sorts of KPIs do reflect the environmental, social and governance risks that are pertinent to the sector. So banks, for example, as I mentioned earlier, it's very important that they integrate these considerations into their lending. So we would be having that conversation with them rather than a conversation about their own emissions, for example. And, you know, health and safety is relevant in some sectors. It's not so relevant in others where the work isn't quite so dangerous. So the metrics that we analyse, and to be honest with you, there's a whole industry of ESG research providers out there who also try and do the same thing to make sure that you're only tracking the material risks and issues for each sector.
But a lot has changed over the recent years, a lot of improvements. Any other questions, comments, please? Mike.
Thank you, Chairman, and I've written a rather long question, which I've made quite short now. Thank you for being with us today as well. I appreciate that. And Patrick, thank you once again. You fill us with information and details of figures that are powerful, to say the least, in the way that voting's going in particular. I think that was really powerful what you put across here. My questions are pretty open-ended, to be quite honest, because on every page that we've read today, basically, we're recognising the need for change and climate change in particular. From your report I'm talking about now. So if discussion and engagement is the right thing to do, and I agree it is at this point, how far down the line do you go with that on recognising that disinvestment from fossil fuels is really going to increase substantially and more speedily in recent years? Thinking on that, in 2030, the council itself will be have a zero net tolerance, to be honest. So I would imagine that you're not going to leave it till 9 years down the line and then the last year panic. You'll have a plan in place probably 5 years prior to that date. In which case, does that give you more leverage? Because I'm assuming, as I think it was Councillor Waters suggested, looking at other industries such as robotics, that you have an investment strategy outside of the investments that we see in this report, such as Shell and Barclays and Rio Tinto, which that I find distressing. However, there's obviously things going on that we're not aware of that gives you time to alter your investments to ensure our pension scheme moves forward. And I'm sure it's not going to be at lastminute.com, because that would be bad management. So my question is, what are they? Can you tell me? If not, I don't mind, as long as you're doing it. But also, I really would like to know the sort of timescale that you are looking at to actually challenge the Shells of the world that hold such a stronghold, because they have the loaded gun. They're holding the gun to our head. Yes, we'll disinvest, and yeah, they will do. There's no doubt about that, because there's demand to do that. But it'll be at their pace. What pace are we looking at changing things?
I mean, I think perhaps if I can have a go at that first at the high level, and then I'll leave the experts to come in at the detailed level, because that's kind of my role as the chair. I mean, this isn't something that we're waiting to do to get to 2030 or to get to 2050. This is something that's going on right here, right now. And in fact, it's been something which we've been doing since the outset of the company. And as Councillor Kerry said, what we're seeing now, and I think it's really interesting, we're actually seeing the pace of this ramp up, because, I've been sort of pushing this ESG corporate governance rock uphill for the last 35 years, it feels. I think we are seeing some real action now, both from investors coming together as a whole to really act together. And you saw Patrick's alphabet soup there of how we're engaged with lots of those. But actually, companies starting to respond to those issues in a way that, when I was, a million years younger, pushing this boulder uphill, no one was interested. Even 5 or 10 years ago, during the financial crisis, companies really weren't interested, and they'd pull different investors off, face them off against each other, play them off against each other. So I think we have seen, as the chair has pointed out, some real change from an investor side, but actually also change and engagement from a company side. So you see companies that have been fossil fuel companies becoming power. So we're starting to see, as you said with that example, that transition to greener energy. But it's also making sure that we can operate across the piece, so that we can make sure that companies are operating across the E, the S and the G, because all of those will be important coming together. And we've seen that, for example, with Tesla and some of their corporate governance activities. So it's making sure that we can operate across the piece and keep that pressure up. So it isn't about waiting till 2030, but it's also making sure, coming back to my sort of opening point, that we can work together with you so that we can work to make sure that we can meet different partner funds' ambitions towards net zero and the different timelines that they're all on towards net zero. So it is about making sure that we can have those conversations, but it absolutely isn't about waiting until, you know, November 2029 or whatever to do that. That's happening right here, right now, and you know, Patrick and his team have absolutely got their foot. I was going to say on the gas pedal, but that would be the wrong analogy. On the electric car pedal, on that particular point, Mike or Patrick. I don't know if you've got other comments.
I would just say quickly, and then Patrick, you can jump in. We talked a little bit about thematic investing. We are very clear that we have to do both things for you, which is do the RI and protect the planet, but also generate investment returns to enable you to pay pensions. Absolutely. So there are lots of thematic things going on, and we could say, you know, water is a theme, robotics is a theme. There's lots going on. You know, space is a theme. We're trying to look at all these themes within the investment portfolios to generate returns, but generate them in a sustainable way, and that's what you'll see when the sustainable funds comes to fruition.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that you know, it's not all about engagement. ESG integration is a very important part of responsible investment. And when we challenge our external managers, we do ask them about the oil and gas companies in their portfolio, any companies that have that sort of profile. We do challenge them on their investment case, and we do ask them about how did you get comfortable about this company? How are you engaging with this company? So that's fundamental part of what we do is that investment analysis. And then with the sustainable equity fund, one of the advantages of investing in this way is that you buy in this real deep expertise in the area of, for example, of the transition to a lower carbon economy. And you're investing with fund managers that are equipped to identify these opportunities and not only identify them, but work out ways to take advantage and play them, but which is often the challenge with sustainable investment, is finding a way of investing in that theme, whether it be carbon capture and storage, hydrogen, or any of the other transition themes that are out there. So that is a work that is very much fundamentally part of what we do. And I don't want people to think that I'm against the idea of divesting from companies. If a company is clearly not embracing the challenges associated with the transition, and that you know, it affects the investment case, then you shouldn't invest in it. So I'm in favour of divesting company by company, rather than identifying sectors and saying, right, well, we won't invest in any company in this sector, because they're all different. They all have different risks in terms of stranded assets, and they all have different, you know, reserve profiles, and you should look at them individually and make informed investment decisions based on that detailed, in-depth analysis.
Is that okay, Mike? Any other questions? Yes, Lee.
Yeah, just following up on Mike's question. So is there a set date for when we're looking at being carbon neutral, the pension fund?
I'm sorry, I missed it. I was just looking.
Is there a set date for when the pension fund is looking at being carbon neutral and net zero? Because it all just seems a bit of a vague timescale. There isn't one.
Okay, I don't think we've set that, but we will be discussing that at the next working group that we're having, that hopefully you will come along to. Okay. William, I think you've put a hand up on the screen.
Yeah, I was going to make just a comment about pooling. You're probably aware that the government will be issuing new guidance on pooling in all likelihood, and it's likely to emphasise their desire that we put more of our assets with the pool. So it's really important that LGPS Central does work well and is a success. I remember about 2 years ago, Terry Needham asked me a very direct question. He said, can you recommend us giving money to the pool? And I had to slightly hesitate before saying anything. I think we're in a much better position now. But ultimately, we have our fiduciary duty because ultimately it is performance that matters. And when I'm trying to assess LGPS Central, I want them to be of a similar caliber to a decent, good private asset manager. Doesn't have to be the best, but a good private asset manager. And I will be looking at things like governance, culture, resources. So it's very good to hear both Mike and Joanne talk about those. And I think that's what you should focus on, Joanne and Mike, and what we should be looking for. Out of that will come a track record. It's far too early for us to say, yes, LGPS Central has a good performance record or not. But out of those three things will come a good track record. I'm just going to pick up Joanne on one thing she said, which was that the last few years have been a tough investment environment. I don't think they have been. I think the amount of money the government's been pushing into the world, right the way around the world, is actually been quite easy. The tough time will come when you have a financial crisis, and that's when you need to make good decisions. So generally, my kind of comment is that really good progress from the pool. Really important that they do carry on delivering a good service to us. And I'm very encouraged by what I've heard.
Thank you very much, William. I've got Andre.
Thank you. That's a very interesting discussion. It's the first time I've ever been in a room full of investment managers and what have you, where we've not talked about making any money for the people who invest the money, which is very important. We must not lose sight of that. And what the gentleman just come in on before said, I trust you to take these decisions, to be responsible what companies we deal with, not to deal with companies that aren't looking at having a sustainable future and carbon neutral. And I would expect you to do that with the kind of money that you're paid to do. But the main part is you have got to make money for our pensioners. And like you've said it before, we're all right now. We're talking about the stock market at 7,200. Everybody's happy to go along. We can do this. We can invest in this and do that and do the other. But when the market drops to 4,000, right? All these things that we're looking at now may just be put to the side. I expect you to do that. All these questions that you're being asked today, I expect you to do that as looking after 22 billion pound of our money? Yeah. But most of all, I expect you to look after the pensioners out there who are living on fixed incomes, who need the money to live from day to day. They are number one, right? Number two is sustainability, carbon future, all that comes in. But that's the first thing. And if you came to me saying, well, look, we're all nice and clean now and everything, but the market's gone and we're not doing as well as so-and-so and so-and-so, and my pensioners are out of pocket, I would take you to task on that first, because that is your job, first and foremost. Thank you.
And if I could just respond to that, I think one of the really refreshing things about all the pooling companies, actually, but it's one that I obviously know most about at LGPS Central, is the focus is that we're very different culturally, I think, and I would say that, wouldn't I, to other asset management companies, because we are created by you. And so we have a very different philosophy. And one of the things that's really struck me about the people that we've recruited who come in from asset management, traditional asset management backgrounds, is they've come to us and said, the thing I really like about working at LGPS Central is that I can get up in the morning and I know why I'm getting up, and I'm getting up to help the members. And that's, I think that's genuinely something which, absolutely comes from the top of the board right the way down through the company. So that singular focus is absolutely there.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that, because I've seen this in so many different things. These taking over the world, which is fine. There's a climate emergency. We need to do it. But we're in like a little bit of a phony war now. We've got this stock market running at 7,100 and everything's going well and everybody's got lots of money and everybody's coming here. But I have lived long enough to see the stock market crash and see people in dire straits. And it's your job and people out there to look after their money. And if somebody's not on it, disinvest the money. If you find out, you make the decision. If they're not playing ball, that's it. Shell found that out, didn't they, to their things? And I think that must have sent a message around the world like that. And so I trust you with our assets, and I think Eric would be the same. If we thought you weren't doing the job, we'd bring you to task. Thank you. Thank you for your work, by the way.
Can I just comment on that before you come back, John? I mean, one of the things that I think we've said most, or I've said a number of times, is net returns, according to our asset allocation and the right returns for those allocations, and our business with you. So I think you understand where we come from. Is that you okay with that? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? I don't see any more indications, so I think we're at the stage where it's my duty to thank you very, very much for appearing here today. It's brilliant, and it's really good to see you. It's good that we're getting back to somewhere near normal, or whatever new normal is going to be. And no doubt we'll meet up with you. I think you've got some events coming up in the autumn that maybe you would like to invite the members of the committee to. Investment Day and all those, Mike. I don't know if you want to just remind us what those are.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's an RI Day. We've done these 2 years now. Yeah. So this will be the third year. It's on October the 13th. I think venue to be determined, might be virtual, might be real. Who knows? But we'd very much welcome all of you to come along and listen to the RI debate and contribute to the RI debate, because I'm sure it will be a fascinating debate.
Thank you very much. And finally, to you who are here, have a safe journey home. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that, everybody. I need to have the vote on the recommendation that we all have considered the report. All those in favour, please. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. That's carried. Number 11 is the work programme set out on page 112 of your pack on the white pages. I'll move the recommendation, which is on 112, that we consider any amendments required.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
And reserve the right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments about the work programme, please? Do notice that the actual date for the month's not on yet. That's because the final dates of the committee is only just out and the papers were written. So we'll update that for you, and you should have all received invites through the Teams system to those meetings, and I hope you've all responded to say you can come. Any other questions or comments, please? Anne? Yeah.
And I can see that we have quite a few new members. Are you organising any training?
Yes, and Tamsin, I think, has written already to all members to ask them for what they would like to do, and really it's very important that everybody gets involved. We need to really have a good standard of training in this pension fund. I think that's right, isn't it, Keith?
Yeah. I think Tamsin sent details out of training events, and obviously there's the standard training, a 3-day event that I know a couple of people have signed up to. Obviously anybody else who hasn't been on that before, we'd recommend it as being essential to being a part of this committee. Thank you. Yeah, and if other members, non-voting members, also invited, Keith, could we send a reminder about that email, please? Yep, can do.
Thank you. William, is yours a legacy hand, or is it? I think by looking at your face,
it is a legacy hand. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. So move the application. We consider the report. All those in favour, please. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to everybody for your time today. It's been an interesting day, and we look forward to the next one in September. Thank you very, very much.